Greetings and salutations everyone, got another one here that I hadn't seen in quite a while, but seeing as I needed a pick-me-up recently, figured it's time to revisit it. But before I continue, here it comes. If you enjoy this content, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually once or twice a week, but occasionally I work in a third or a fourth. Check out my back catalog while you're here and share both this video and channel around, as well as sticking around to the end, as it really does help out the channel quite a bit. Now that that's out of the way, this entry is for the 2012 film Dark Shadows, starring this guy named Johnny Depp. You may have heard of him, I think his name was in the news recently, but it also has Michelle Pfeiffer, Helena Bonham Carter, Chloe Grace Moretz, Ava Green, Johnny Lee Miller, Jackie Earle Haley is, amongst others. It's directed by Tim Burton and is based on the 1960s television show of the same name. It even has some of those same actors in it with some cameos in a scene, as well as Alice Cooper somehow comes into it since it takes place in the 70s. But to give a little bit more about it, the synopsis for this film is as follows. An imprisoned vampire, Barnabas Collins, is set free and returns to his ancestral home where his dysfunctional descendants are in need of his protection. Well, we really kind of rocket into this one, they bring us into it pretty quickly, explaining the backstory and then popping us into the 1970s where Barnabas kind of breaks free out of where he's been buried and now he's going to help out family. And though I'm a fan of this film and feel it's a fun ride, it wasn't until this latest viewing that I looked at it a bit differently to find out why I like this film when a lot of people seem to have not really received it very well. So one thing I kind of realized is that, with the original, I only saw a handful of minutes of the episodes of the original in reruns. This was something that ran from, I believe, 66 to 71, so I wasn't even alive then, and it wasn't really available too much on reruns for me. So occasionally I'd come across a little bit of it, and dimly aware that in, I think, 91, they tried to either continue it or reboot it. So not being a fan of the source material, mainly just from not being exposed to it, I didn't really have any issue with anything that they would change or any kind of, little ways that they would tweak the story a bit. Now, from what I understand, the big difference here is that this one leans into the comedy much, much more. It brings about this sense of campiness to it that's a bit too much for some viewers' taste, especially those who are fans of the original show. But watching it this time, I leaned into that even more. I went into it realizing it, at its heart, it's more of a comedy than anything else, though it does have some romance and drama thrown in there. But I really saw it as not something that is disrespecting or mixing up the original source material as much as it's kind of making fun of soap operas in general. Because soap operas are a bit campy and overly dramatic when you really look at them, and Dark Shadows, from what I understand, was one of those as well. So they made fun of soaps in a way in Dark Shadows. For some people it didn't work out, but for me it really did, because going into this with an open mind, it felt like they were basically telling me, don't take this story too seriously, just have some fun with it and so on, which I did. This isn't to say that the film is perfect, though. Even, a day later, it's hard for me to kind of really remember what ultimately it was about, because it felt, though the characters and performances were great, the story was kind of all over the place and lacked much focus, a coherent linear point that it's going to stick to and follow throughout. For instance, with some minor spoilers here, but I'm going to leave out some details, one character, out of the blue, comes out as a werewolf. There's nothing in the entire film leading up to it which stuck out to me that there was anything different about this character, much less that they would even be a werewolf. Another character can see ghosts, which comes up early on, but I feel like both those roles were kind of wasted. They were just watered down, where they could have more easily been combined into one role and leaned into the ghost side more, since it was actually more important to what was going on in the story than for whatever reason they brought in this werewolf stuff. Also, there's another character who, they're not good, let's say. Not to the point of being much of an antagonist, really, but they eventually just kind of leave. It would have been better to just leave them out entirely and concentrate on the other characters and relationships by cutting that one character, combining another two, and kind of focus on what the ultimate story is. But even with all those gripes aside, this film is absolutely gorgeous. The way that it was shot, not just in because not just in the setting and the style, putting it in this kind of dark, dreary, gothic town in a way, and setting it in the 70s, but the shots themselves, in some cases it feels like they had some sort of a focus or filter effect going on in the borders of the scene. Absolutely beautiful. So what to expect if you decide to check this one out and you've never seen it before? It's campy. It's very campy, but yet it's also overly dramatic in a way. And you need to be ready to kind of accept that, as well as how dark and brooding it can be at points. You know, dark, brooding, gothic, and just know there's a lot of vampire fun, a lot of one-liners, a lot of puns, again with that comedy and the campiness. The story, it's interesting, but it may be a little bit hard to follow because it kind of jumps all over the place some. But the other thing is that it's got an absolutely great soundtrack. You know, we've got Alice Cooper on there, Donovan, I think Moody Blues. I think they even threw one of the songs by the Carpenters on there. So they got all this really interesting, cool 70s stuff in there. There might be some Iggy Pop. I'll have to check that again. But anyways, it was really put together well. So you have a film that you're going to watch mainly because it's going to be fun. It's going to be dark. We're going to have vampires in it. We're going to have a lot of this humor built in and a great soundtrack. And yeah, if you want something fun to check out, not really take it too seriously, this is definitely one of those films to check out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this little video here and sticking around to the end, because as all that stuff that I mentioned at the beginning, it really does help out the channel a lot. And so yeah, working on a few more videos, and I hope you come by for those as well. Be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.